Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something that's going to completely flip your understanding of sleep and probably save your sanity in the process. Picture this. You're lying in your bed right now, staring at the ceiling for the third hour straight, your mind racing like a hamster on espresso, wondering why your great mother seemed to sleep like a baby while you're out here collecting dark circles like Pokemon cards. Well, buckle up, because you're about to discover that your medieval ancestors had cracked the code on something we've completely forgotten, and you probably won't survive another sleepless night once you realize how badly we've screwed this up. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time. It is there. I love seeing our global Insomniac community unite across time zones. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in a bustling medieval marketplace, the air thick with the scent of freshly baked bread, and something decidedly less pleasant, wafting from the nearest dung heap. The sun has just dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep purples and golds, and you notice something strange. People aren't panicking about bedtime. There's no frantic scrolling through sleep apps, no desperate Amazon searches for the latest miracle pillow, no heated debates about blue light. These folks are just chill. But here's where it gets interesting. They're dealing with the exact same sleep struggles you are. Medieval Europeans were plagued by what they called the wakeful sickness, a condition so common that every village had at least 3 different folk remedies involving various combinations of herbs, prayers, and what can only be described as medieval placebo effect. The difference wasn't that they slept better than you do, it's that they had figured out something we've completely forgotten in our modern rush toward 8-hour efficiency. You see a merchant closing up his stall, and he's not checking his phone or worrying about tomorrow's emails. Mainly because neither exists yet, obviously, but he's also not exhibiting that particular brand of bedtime anxiety that has you lying awake, calculating exactly how many hours of sleep you'll get if you fall asleep right now. He knows something you don't, something that was passed down through generations, like a precious family recipe, until industrialization came along and decided it knew better. The medieval world operated on what historians call natural time, a rhythm dictated by the sun, the seasons, and something much deeper than our modern obsession with optimization. People went to bed when darkness fell, not because they were tired, but because that's simply what humans did. No artificial lighting meant no choice in the matter, which sounds restrictive until you realize it eliminated most of the decision fatigue that keeps your brain active at midnight. But here's the fascinating part, and this is where your modern understanding about sleep is about to be transformed. Medieval people didn't even attempt to sleep through the night. The very concept of uninterrupted 8-hour sleep would have seemed as unusual to them as modern technology. They had discovered something that our sleep-challenged civilization has completely forgotten. The art of working with your body's natural rhythms instead of struggling not against them like you're in some sort of internal battle. Historians still debate whether this medieval sleep pattern was purely practical, or if there was something more profound at work, but the evidence is remarkable. Court records, personal diaries, literature, even legal documents from the era all reference the same phenomenon. You follow the merchant and his wife as they make their way toward the local monastery, where the evening bells have just finished their haunting call across the valley. The massive stone walls loom ahead of you, and you can already hear something that stops you in your tracks. The sound of absolute silence. Not the kind of silence you get at 3 a.m. when you're wide awake, scrolling through your phone, but genuine, peaceful quiet that seems to wrap around the building like a warm blanket. The heavy wooden doors creak open, and you step into a world where sleep isn't a battle to be won, but a dance to be learned. The monks gliding through these corridors have turned rest into an art form, and they're about to teach you something that will make every sleep hygiene article you've ever read look like amateur hour. These guys didn't just stumble onto better sleep. They engineered it with the precision of medieval scientists, which is saying something considering they also thought the earth was flat, and that bloodletting cured everything. Brother Thomas, a weathered monk with kind eyes and hands permanently stained with ink from copying manuscripts, notice your confusion and gestures for you to follow him. He's been living this monastic rhythm for 37 years, and he moves with the calm confidence of someone who hasn't experienced insomnia since the Crusades were still a thing. You're about to discover that monasteries weren't just centers of prayer and learning. They were sleep laboratories, conducting the most comprehensive study of human rest patterns in history, even if they didn't realize it at the time. Dick, the monastery operates on what they call the divine office, a schedule of prayers that breaks the day and night into precise segments. But here's where it gets fascinating. This wasn't just about spiritual discipline. The monks had accidentally stumbled onto something that modern sleep science is only now beginning to understand. By structuring their sleep around multiple periods of rest and wakefulness, they had solved the insomnia puzzle that keeps you tossing and turning like a rotisserie chicken. You watch as the monks prepare for Compline, the final prayer service before their first sleep period. Notice how they're not rushing, not checking the time obsessively, not calculating sleep debt like it's their mortgage payment. They move with deliberate slowness, allowing their minds to naturally wind down in a way that would make your meditation app weep with envy. There's no forcing, no sleep performance anxiety, just a gentle transition from day consciousness to something deeper and more restorative. Brother Thomas explains that they retire to their cells around 8 p.m. But, and this is crucial, they don't expect to sleep until dawn. Medieval monastics had discovered what they called prima somnia and secunda somnia, first sleep and second sleep. They would rest for about 4 hours, wake naturally in the middle of the night, spend time in quiet reflection or prayer, then return to sleep for another 3 to 4 hours before dawn prayers. This wasn't insomnia. This was intentional, structured, and incredibly effective. The monk cells are Spartan but comfortable, designed with sleep architecture that puts your Pinterest bedroom goals to shame. Small windows positioned to track natural light cycles, straw mattresses that conform to the body without the pressure points of modern springs, and thick stone walls that maintain consistent temperature year-round. No blue light, no electromagnetic interference, no neighbor's dog barking at 2 a.m., just pure, uninterrupted connection to natural circadian rhythms. Historians still argue whether monastic sleep patterns influenced broader medieval society or simply reflected universal human tendencies. But the evidence suggests these religious communities were documenting something that existed far beyond monastery walls. Peasants, merchants, nobles, everyone seemed to follow similar patterns, as if there was some deeper biological programming that modern life has completely overridden. You settle into the guest quarters, and Brother Thomas shares something that will fundamentally change how you think about sleep. The Midnight Awakening isn't a failure. It's a feature. Medieval people called this period the Watching, and they used it for prayer, meditation, intimate conversations with spouses, creative thinking, or simply lying quietly and processing the day's events. This wasn't time stolen from sleep. It was an integral part of the sleep cycle, as natural and necessary as REM phases. The monastery bells chime again, softer now, and you realize you're witnessing something extraordinary. Community of people who have mastered the art of rest, not by fighting their biology, but by embracing it completely. They've turned sleep into a spiritual practice, a form of active meditation that refreshes both body and soul. No wonder they seem so serene, so centered, so completely free from the anxiety that keeps your mind racing when your head hits the pillow. As you drift off to your own first sleep, surrounded by centuries of accumulated wisdom about human rest, you begin to understand that insomnia isn't a modern disease. It's what happens when you abandon the natural rhythms that kept your ancestors sleeping soundly through plagues, wars, and medieval winters. The monks didn't just find God in their prayers. They found the secret to perfect sleep. And tomorrow, you're going to learn exactly how they did it. You wake naturally in the monastery guest quarters at what your phone would tell you is 1:47 a.m. But here's the thing. You don't feel groggy or disoriented like you would after a middle-of-the-night awakening in your regular life. Instead, you feel refreshed, alert, and strangely peaceful. This is your introduction to what medieval Europeans simply called the natural way, a sleep pattern so universal that they had specific names for each phase, specific activities for the wakeful period, and absolutely zero anxiety about being awake in the middle of the night. Welcome to segmented sleep, the biological rhythm that governed human rest for thousands of years, until we decided we knew better. You're experiencing what anthropologists call bimodal sleep architecture, two distinct periods, one of deep rest, separated by 1 to 3 hours of quiet wakefulness. This isn't insomnia. This isn't a sleep disorder. This is how humans actually evolved to sleep, and you're about to understand why fighting against it has been making your nights miserable. The monastery around you hums with gentle activity during these midnight hours. You hear soft footsteps in the corridors, quiet conversations, the scratch of quills on parchment, as monks copy manuscripts by candlelight. This isn't disruption, it's integration. Medieval people had learned to use this natural awakening period for reflection, prayer, creativity, and connection, turning what modern sleep medicine considers a problem into one of the most productive and spiritually rich parts of their day. Brother Thomas finds you in the corridor and smiles knowingly. "Ah, you've discovered the watching," he says, using the medieval term for this midnight consciousness. He explains that this wakeful period serves crucial biological and psychological functions that your ancestors understood intuitively. During first sleep, your body processes physical restoration, muscle repair, immune system boosting, the basic maintenance that keeps you functioning. But the watching period, that's when your mind does its deepest work. You follow him to the scriptorium, where several monks are quietly engaged in copying, illuminating, and binding books. The work requires intense concentration, yet they perform it effortlessly during what you would consider the middle of the night. Their minds are clear, focused, and surprisingly sharp, nothing like the 3M brain fog you experience during your own unwanted awakenings. This is because they're working with their natural circadian rhythms instead of against them. The segmented sleep pattern follows a predictable cycle that aligns perfectly with human biology. First sleep typically begins around 8 or 9 p.m. and lasts approximately 4 hours, taking you through the deepest phases of non-REM sleep. You wake naturally as your core body temperature begins to rise and stress hormones like cortisol start their daily cycle. Instead of panicking about being awake, medieval people embraced this period for quiet activities that didn't require artificial stimulation. Historical records from across medieval Europe document this pattern with remarkable consistency. French court documents refer to premier sommeil and second sommeil. English literature mentions first sleep and morning sleep. Italian texts describe primo sonno and secondo sonno. This wasn't cultural variation. This was universal human experience, documented across languages, social classes, and geographic regions with the kind of consistency that suggests deep biological programming. Historians still argue whether segmented sleep was purely environmental, a response to long winter nights, and limited artificial lighting, or if it represents our natural circadian preference that's been suppressed by modern lifestyle. You're awakening again during your second watching period. But this time you're not in the monastery. You've somehow drifted into a medieval village home where the real magic of segmented sleep reveals itself. The family around you treats these midnight hours like a secret society meeting, complete with whispered conversations, intimate moments, and activities that would make your productivity-obsessed brain absolutely lose its mind. Welcome to the medieval version of me time, except it's built right into the natural sleep cycle and requires stealing hours from rest or feeling guilty about self-care. The husband and wife in the bed next to you engage in what historians politely call marital intimacy, and you realize that segmented sleep didn't just improve rest, it revolutionized relationships. Think about it. When was the last time you and your partner had unhurried, unscheduled time together without phones, work stress, or the pressure of fitting intimacy into your packed schedule? Medieval couples had 1 to 3 hours every single night. When the world went quiet, children were asleep, and they could connect without the exhaustion that makes modern romance feel like another item on your to-do list. But it wasn't just about romance. These midnight hours became the foundation of medieval intellectual and spiritual life in ways that would make your scattered attention span weep with envy. You watch as the village blacksmith sits by his dying fire, not scrolling through social media or watching Netflix, but actually thinking deep, contemplative thought that processes the day's events, solves technical problems, and generates the kind of insights that only come during quiet reflection. This is meditation without apps, therapy without copays, and creativity without forced brainstorming sessions. The village midwife uses her watching time to prepare herbal remedies, sorting through her knowledge of plants and healing while her mind is clear and focused. Medieval craftsmen would plan their next projects, visualizing complex woodwork or stonework in detail. Mothers would mend clothes while contemplating their children's futures. Fathers would sharpen tools while processing the weight of providing for their families. These weren't chores. They were meditative practices that combined practical necessity with psychological processing. Religious devotion during the watching hours took on a completely different quality than daytime prayer. Without the distractions and pressures of daily life, medieval people could engage in what mystics called pure contemplation, a state of consciousness that modern meditation practitioners spend years trying to achieve. The darkness, the silence, the gentle fatigue from first sleep created perfect conditions for what we now call transcendent experiences, except they happened naturally every single night instead of requiring expensive retreats or specialized training. You discover that medieval people had developed elaborate customs around the watching period that would put your bedtime routine to shame. Some families would light a single candle and gather for storytelling, passing down oral traditions that kept family history and cultural knowledge alive across generations. Others practiced what they called night crafts, delicate needlework, carving, or writing that required focus and patience, impossible during busy daylight hours. Historians still argue whether these midnight activities were purely practical responses to long winter nights, or if they served deeper psychological functions, but the evidence suggests medieval people intuitively understood something modern psychology is rediscovering. The brain processes information differently during quiet, low stimulation. Creative insights and problem-solving abilities all peak during states of relaxed attention, exactly what the watching period provided naturally. The village inn becomes a particularly fascinating case study in medieval sleep culture. Travelers sharing rooms wouldn't be disturbed by others' midnight awakenings because everyone expected them. Innkeepers would provide small tasks for wakeful guests, mending, reading by candlelight, or quiet conversation that helped pass the watching hours productively. The concept of sleeping through the night would have seemed as strange to them as our modern anxiety about midnight awakenings would seem unnecessary and counterproductive. Children learn this rhythm from infancy, naturally developing segmented sleep patterns that aligned with family life. Medieval parents didn't stress about sleep training or worry about midnight wake-ups because they understood these patterns as normal human development. Kids would wake during the watching period, spend quiet time with parents or siblings, then return to second sleep without the drama that accompanies modern bedtime battles. Imagine raising children without sleep anxiety. It's almost too peaceful to contemplate. The economic implications of segmented sleep created entire industries around midnight productivity. Candle makers specialized in long-burning varieties designed for watching period activities. Furniture craftsmen created special tables and chairs optimized for quiet nighttime work. Even architecture adapted, with homes featuring small alcoves or nooks designed specifically for contemplative midnight activities. The watching period wasn't dead time to be endured. It was valuable time to be utilized, respected, and enjoyed. As dawn approaches and you prepare for morning prayers with your medieval hosts, you realize that segmented sleep offered something modern life has almost entirely lost: protected time for introspection and deep connection. No phones buzzing with urgent notifications, no guilt about productivity, no anxiety about tomorrow's schedule, just pure, uninterrupted space for being human in ways that feel almost revolutionary compared to your normal rushed existence. You're suddenly transported from medieval candlelight to the harsh fluorescent glare of a modern sleep laboratory where Dr. Thomas Veer is about to accidentally blow up everything's sleep. Science thought it knew about human rest patterns. The year is 1992, and you're witnessing one of the most important accidental discoveries in sleep research history. One that validates everything those medieval monks and village families knew instinctively about how humans are supposed to sleep. Sibyllar alert, your ancestors weren't primitive. They were right, and we've been doing this wrong for about 200 years. Dr. Wehr's experiment sounds almost boring on paper. Take a group of volunteers, remove all artificial lighting, and see what happens to their sleep patterns when exposed only to natural light cycles. He expected to find that people would sleep longer during winter months, maybe shift their bedtime slightly earlier. What he discovered instead was so revolutionary that it forced the entire sleep medicine community to reconsider everything they thought they knew about insomnia, sleep disorders, and what constitutes normal human rest. Within weeks of eliminating artificial lighting, every single participant in the study naturally developed segmented sleep patterns identical to what you experienced in that medieval monastery. They would fall asleep around 5 p.m., wake naturally. After 4 hours, spend 1 to 3 hours in quiet wakefulness, then return to sleep until dawn. This wasn't learned behavior or cultural conditioning. This was pure biology expressing itself when freed from modern constraints. Your medieval ancestors didn't have a sleep tradition. They had optimal human physiology. Gus, the participants described their midnight awakenings in terms that would have been instantly recognizable to Brother Thomas or that village midwife. They felt refreshed and alert during the watching period, experienced profound creativity and insight, reported deeper emotional processing, and found the return to second sleep effortless and natural. One volunteer described it as the most restful and psychologically satisfying sleep experience of my adult life, which is exactly what medieval people took for granted every single night. But here's where modern sleep science gets really interesting and slightly embarrassing. Researchers realized they had been pathologizing completely normal human sleep patterns for decades. Middle-of-the-night awakenings, which millions of people suffer anxiety about and spend billions trying to prevent, aren't sleep disorders at all. They're your biology trying to express its natural rhythm despite artificial lighting, irregular schedules, and cultural pressure to sleep in one 8-hour block that would have seemed absurd to your great-great-grandmother. Dr. Russell Foster at Oxford University expanded on Vehr's work, demonstrating that human circadian rhythms naturally favor bimodal sleep architecture when not disrupted by artificial stimuli. His research team found that segmented sleep patterns improve cognitive function, emotional regulation, creative problem solving, and overall psychological well-being compared to consolidated sleep schedules. Medieval people weren't just sleeping better. They were thinking better, feeling better, and processing life more effectively than we do with our optimized 8-hour sleep hygiene routines. The neurological implications absolutely demolished conventional wisdom about sleep consolidation. During the natural watching period between sleep segments, the brain enters what researchers call default mode network activation, a state of consciousness that facilitates memory consolidation, emotional integration. This is the same brain state that meditation practitioners spend years trying to achieve, except it happens automatically. When you stop fighting your natural circadian rhythms, historians still argue whether cultural documentation of segmented sleep reflects universal human experience or merely pre-industrial adaptation, but the biological evidence, multiple independent research teams across different continents have replicated diverse findings, confirming that segmented sleep emerges naturally in populations isolated from artificial lighting regardless of cultural background, geographic location, or this isn't learned behavior. It's hardwired human programming. Sleep researcher, Dr. Roger Eckerich spent 16 years documenting historical references to segmented sleep across multiple cultures and centuries, uncovering over 500 references to first sleep, second sleep, and midnight. Watching periods in literature, court records, medical texts, and personal diaries spanning from ancient times through the early 1900s. The consistency is staggering. People across completely different societies, languages, and time periods all described essentially identical sleep experiences that match modern laboratory findings perfectly. The implications for treating insomnia are revolutionary and slightly infuriating when you consider how much money you've probably spent fighting against your natural sleep patterns instead of viewing middle-of-the-night awakenings as failures requiring pharmaceutical intervention. Sleep medicine is beginning to recognize them as normal biological expressions that can be worked with rather than suppressed. Your insomnia might not be a disorder. It might be your body desperately trying to follow its evolutionary programming, despite modern lifestyle interference. Modern chronobiology research has identified the specific hormonal and neurological mechanisms that drive segmented sleep patterns. Core body temperature fluctuations, cortisol cycling, melatonin production patterns, and growth hormone release all align perfectly with bimodal sleep architecture when allowed to function without artificial disruption. Your medieval ancestors didn't understand the science, but they lived in harmony with it, which turns out to be far more effective than fighting against it with supplements, devices, and sleep optimization strategies. As you process these science, you begin to understand that everything you've been told about healthy sleep habits may have been addressing the symptoms while ignoring the underlying biological reality. The 8-hour sleep standard isn't based on human evolution, it's based on industrial efficiency, and that distinction is about to change how you approach rest forever. You're now standing in a bustling 1,880 factory town, watching the death of human sleep patterns in real time. And it's honestly heartbreaking. The Industrial Revolution didn't just change how people worked, it systematically destroyed thousands of years of evolved sleep wisdom with the efficiency of a medieval plague. Except instead of killing bodies, it murdered rest. You're witnessing the exact moment when humanity traded its birthright of natural, restorative sleep for the promise of increased productivity And, spoiler alert, we're still paying that debt with interest every sleepless night. The transformation begins with gas lighting, then electric bulbs, flooding homes and workplaces with artificial illumination that tricks your circadian rhythms into thinking the sun never sets. Factory owners quickly realized that workers who stayed awake longer could produce more goods. And suddenly, the natural rhythm that had governed human rest for millennia became an obstacle to profit. Your great-great-grandfather segmented sleep pattern, perfectly adapted to seasonal light cycles and biological needs, was about to be steamrolled by the relentless march of industrial efficiency. Factory shift schedules demanded consolidated work periods that aligned with machine operation rather than human biology. The concept of clock time replaced natural time, forcing workers to sleep when schedules dictated rather than when their bodies felt ready. Segment sleep patterns became incompatible with rigid work hours that started at dawn, regardless of individual circadian preferences. The watching period, once sacred time for reflection and family connection, transformed from biological necessity into lost productivity, time that could be better spent working or sleeping more efficiently. You watch families struggle to maintain their traditional sleep rhythms while adapting to industrial demands, and the psychological toll is immediately apparent. Children who had naturally developed segmented sleep patterns were forced into consolidated schedules that aligned with school hours, designed around factory shift models. Parents lost their midnight connect, replacing intimate conversation and contemplative activities with exhausted collapse into beds positioned for maximum space efficiency rather than rest quality. The medical establishment, eager to align with industrial progress, began pathologizing sleep patterns that didn't conform to new efficiency standards. Midnight awakenings, natural for thousands of years, were suddenly diagnosed as disorders requiring treatment. The watching period became it, and segmented sleep transformed from optimal human physiology into a medical problem that needed to be solved with emerging pharmaceutical interventions. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen medieval people used? Well, industrial sleep medicine was about as scientifically grounded, except it actually worked at suppressing natural sleep patterns that were far superior to what replaced them. Electric lighting spread through cities like a biological weapon designed specifically to destroy circadian rhythms. Street lamps, factory lights, and home electrical systems created an environment of perpetual artificial dawn that confused. Every hormonal and neurological system evolved to respond to natural light cycles, melatonin production, and core body temperature regulation, all the biological mechanisms that support segmented sleep were systematically disrupted by technology designed without any consideration of human physiological needs. The economic pressure to maximize working hours created cultural shifts that turned healthy sleep patterns into laziness or inefficiency. The Protestant work ethic combined with industrial scheduling to shame anyone who couldn't adapt to consolidated sleep patterns. Families who maintained traditional rhythms were considered backwards or unproductive, while those who successfully suppressed their natural biology were praised for their modern adaptability and work commitment. Historians still argue whether industrial sleep consolidation was inevitable given technological progress. Dot. Or if alternative development paths could have preserved natural sleep patterns, but the social pressure was up. Entire communities abandoned practices that had sustained human health and psychological well-being for generations in favor of schedules optimized for machine operation rather than biological flourishing. The advertising industry capitalized on the sleep disruption they had helped create, marketing products to address problems that didn't exist before: industrial lifestyle interference, patent medicines for insomnia, mechanical devices for sleep optimization, and early pharmaceutical sleep aids all emerged to treat conditions that were actually normal human biology, express itself despite artificial constraints. You were sold solutions to problems created by ignoring solutions that already worked perfectly. Housing architecture adapted to consolidated sleep schedules, eliminating design features that had supported natural sleep patterns for centuries. Bedrooms became purely functional spaces optimized for single-period sleep, rather than environments that facilitated the various activities of watching periods. The social spaces where families had gathered during midnight hours disappeared, replaced by layouts designed around industrial work schedules and electric lighting that eliminated natural darkness cycles. The transformation happened so rapidly that within 2 generations, segmented sleep went from universal human experience to forgotten historical curiosity. Your grandparents knew instinctively how to work with their natural sleep patterns, but that knowledge was systematically eliminated by industrial lifestyle demands that prioritized economic productivity over biological health. You're back in your own bedroom now, armed with knowledge that's about to completely revolutionize your relationship with sleep. And honestly, it's going to feel a little like discovering you've been using a smartphone as a paperweight for the past decade. The medieval trick that will fix your insomnia isn't actually a trick at all. It's returning to the natural sleep pattern that your body has been desperately trying to express despite every modern obstacle you've unknowingly placed in its way. Time to reclaim your biological birthright and start sleeping like the human you actually are, instead of the productivity machine you've been trained to become. First, you need to completely reframe your relationship with midnight awakenings, and this might be the hardest mental shift you'll make. That 2 a.m. wake-up that sends you into anxiety, spirals about lost sleep time, that's not insomnia. That's your circadian system working exactly as designed, trying to give you access to the most psychologically restorative part of your sleep cycle. Instead of lying there calculating how tired you'll be tomorrow, you're going to embrace the watching period like your medieval ancestors did, turning what feels like sleep failure into the most peaceful part of your night. Start by adjusting your light exposure to support natural circadian rhythms, rather than fighting against them. Begin dimming artificial lights at sunset, using candles or warm, low-intensity lighting for evening activities. Install blackout curtains or eye masks to ensure complete darkness during sleep periods, and consider amber-tinted glasses for evening screen time if you absolutely must use devices. Your goal is to recreate the natural light environment that allowed segmented sleep to emerge naturally in Doctor. Well, here's laboratory participant. When you wake during the night, and you will, because that's what healthy humans do, resist the urge to check your phone, turn on bright lights, or engage in stimulation. Instead, practice what medieval people called lying meditation. Stay in bed, breathe deeply, and allow your mind to process the day's events naturally. This isn't time to solve problems or make plans. It's time for the gentle mental processing that consolidates memories, integrates emotions, and generates creative insights that seem to appear from nowhere. If staying in bed feels uncomfortable, or if your watching period extends beyond an hour, quietly move to a prepared space where you can engage in gentle, non-stimulating activities. Medieval people had the right idea: soft crafts, quiet reading by candlelight, gentle stretching, or contemplative practices that honor the sacred quality of these midnight hours. Keep a journal by your bedside for capturing insights that emerge during the watching period. You'll be dot amazed at the clarity and creativity that flows. When your mind isn't competing with daily distractions, create rituals around your sleep transitions that honor both the first sleep and second sleep periods. Develop an evening routine that signals the beginning of your first sleep cycle and a gentle morning routine that honors the natural conclusion of your second sleep. Think of yourself as participating in an ancient human tradition rather than fighting against a sleep disorder, because that's exactly what you're doing when you embrace segmented sleep patterns. Temperature regulation becomes crucial for supporting natural sleep architecture. Keep your bedroom cool enough to facilitate the core body temperature drops that trigger sleep onset, and layer blankets so you can adjust warmth during the watching period without fully awakening your nervous system. People this intuitively, using thick curtains around beds and layered clothing that could be adjusted without disrupting the sleep environment. Historians still argue whether modern lifestyle allows for complete return to historical sleep patterns, but even partial adoption of segmented sleep principles can dramatically improve rest quality and reduce sleep anxiety. You don't need to replicate medieval life exactly. You just need to work with your biology instead of against it, honoring the natural rhythms that industrial civilization trained you to suppress. Nutrition timing supports segmented sleep when you avoid heavy meals close to bedtime, but allow light, easily digestible foods during extended watching periods if needed. Medieval people often kept simple provisions nearby for midnight hunger, understanding that fighting biological needs creates more disruption than accommodation. And so, as the monastery bells of your imagination chime softly in the distance, you find yourself settling into a deeper understanding of rest than you've ever experienced before. The medieval world fades gently around you, but the wisdom remains, settling into your bones like warm honey, sweet, nourishing, and completely natural. You're no longer afraid of the watching hours that await you. Instead, you welcome them as sacred time, protected space where your mind can wander freely through the landscapes of memory and possibility. The darkness that once felt oppressive now embraces you like an old friend, whispering secrets that can only be heard when the world goes quiet and your heart slows to match the ancient rhythms that have sustained human beings since time began. Your breath deepens as you release the tension of fighting against your own biology, letting go of the anxiety that has made sleep feel like a test you could fail instead of a gift you deserve to receive. The medieval trick isn't really a trick at all. It's remembering who you are beneath the layers of modern conditioning. We're connecting with the natural wisdom that flows through your veins like moonlight through stained glass windows. Feel your body sinking deeper into rest, knowing that if you wake in the quiet hours before dawn, you'll greet that wakening as your ancestors did, with curiosity rather than fear, with gratitude rather than frustration. The watching period awaits you like a gentle teacher, ready to offer insights and peace that can only bloom in the fertile silence between sleeping and waking. The story ends, but your journey with sleep begins anew, guided by centuries of human wisdom and the deep biological intelligence that has never forgotten how to rest, even when you thought you had. Sweet dreams, fellow traveler. The watching hours are yours to discover.